Welcome everybody to PinstripeChronicles podcast. I'm Tats. I am here with Donald and Rob, and it was a very busy weekend on the MLB trade wire, free agent wire. A lot of moves were made, and still the Yankees are still sitting stagnant. And I had made the joke, I'm like, I think that Cashman's waiting for the clearance rack before getting anybody new onto this roster. And I want to clear up. Yeah, it's frustrating that Cashman has not made any moves, but we also know that Cashman's very sly and he's very quiet when he's conducting his business. So is it really something to be concerned about that some of these other teams are making moves that are really significantly improving their roster while the Yankees have not?
This speaks more to Hal Steinbrenner than it does Brian Cashman. I remember when Simonetti was on, he was pretty much told us all that Hal Steinbrenner doesn't want to add another significant contract, $300 million contract, and probably a lot less than that. He doesn't want major years, and he doesn't want major money put in because he's got his heart set on Aaron Judge. This is a Hal Steinbrenner thing, man. What we have here is an owner who's brought up with a silver spoon, okay? And he's also got daddy issues. As I mentioned in an earlier podcast, he does have daddy issues because he does not like the way that his dad ran the Yankees. He didn't like it. He didn't like the bombastic way he did it. And I'll use that word bombastic because that a quote that Kevin Kernan used in the Ball 9 article has just been released when he was talking about, it's just out the other day where he's discussing, comparing the Mets offseason and the Yankees offseason so far. You know, Steve Cohen's put his money where his mouth is. He's got a big mouth, but he is putting money in. And Hal Steinbrenner has never liked the way that George Steinbrenner ran the Yankees. So he's doing things differently. He's doing things his own way. He doesn't want the limelight. He doesn't want to own the back pages. He doesn't want any of that. That's just the way Hal Steinbrenner is. He is as a person, as an owner, and certainly when he's conducting business, he's just not that type. He is not interested in winning the back pages, and he's not interested in winning. I don't use winning, full stop. He's just not that interested in winning. The Yankees are consistently in the bottom two of spend per revenue, and it speaks to what we are, and I think that's why the fans are rightfully frustrated. And it was very interesting. Remember when Brian Cashman said, "How dare we question Hal Steinbrenner?" Remember that? That saying, "The lady doth protest too much." That's why he had to say that, because there's a reason why there's questions about Hal Steinbrenner's commitment. He isn't that committed. What has happened since we embarrassingly got knocked out by the Boston Red Sox and embarrassingly got whitewashed in the division? What happened? He went AWOL. We didn't know where he went. The only thing he did was he sent his PR guys to send this long diatized message about Aaron Boone, like he was St. Francis of Assisi. Gave him a ridiculous contract, far overinflated, far too many years, which made no sense. And the reason why he did that is because he's complacent. That's why he's an owner that just likes things the way things are. He's more than happy to rake in the money, to put a little bit back just to keep the fans sort of happy. And as long as the Yankees are competitive, he will be fine with that. So that's why Aaron Boone's been re-upped for 3 with an option. And that's why Brian Cashman has to operate the way that Hal Steinbrenner wants him to operate. So I'm telling you, Brian Cashman wants to be active in this market. He always does want to be active in the market, but he can't right now. He's hamstrung. He was interested in Simeon, but when the 7th year came along, he was like, "No, I can't do it." He can't spend. Part of him doesn't want to spend massive amounts of money, but also I think the other part is when he wants to be competitive, I'm pretty sure that Hal Steinbrenner is like, no. Hal Steinbrenner himself, remember, he voted for for baseball to lower the luxury tax. Remember, he voted for that. That tells you everything you need to know about our owner right now. So this is a Hal Steinbrenner issue, not a Brian Cashman issue.
To go specifically with Semien, you saw that there was the 7-year, the seventh year on the deal, and here's how the Yankee fans would respond to if they would have given him the 7 years. How could you give him 7 years? We have all these prospects. How are you going to make room for them? You know, and if they go, well, we're going to give somebody a 3-year deal so we can have room for our prospects when they're ready. Well, why are you waiting? Why are you investing so much in an uncertain future? It's a no-win situation when it comes to being the GM of the Yankees, especially when it comes to this fan base. We're ruthless. And that's really the word for it. We're ruthless. We want everything, but we don't want anything.
They're overreactionary. None of our main targets have left the free agent board yet. They weren't in on Scherzer. They weren't in on Semien. I don't care what anyone says. They were never in on him. If that was the case 7 years, they weren't in on him. They weren't in on Marte. There's a difference between checking in and being in on a player. You could check into anybody you want. The Yankees have checked into 18 different shortstops, I'm sure. But now that it's been reported that we've checked in on Andrelton Simmons, everyone's losing their minds. Like, what do you expect Cashman to do? Not check in on every single potential addition? We need a shortstop. So he's going to look at every single player. Correa's still out there. Seager's still out there. He might be signed by the end of the day, but Story is still out there. Simmons is probably the 4th best guy on the board right now. And is it the sexy signing? No, but this is the same group of people that's preaching we need defense at shortstop. So if we go and get a stopgap defensive shortstop for a year or two, but you guys are complaining that we got rid of Velasquez, who was just a defensive guy. He couldn't hit, and Simmons doesn't hit very well either. So it's basically you're just getting a better defensive player if you get Simmons. I don't think that's going to be the case. You could sign Simmons and maybe even Story, because Story's a guy that could potentially move elsewhere down the line. But everyone's acting like the Yankees are not going to do anything when they could be very active in trade talks. The non-tender deadline is tomorrow, so there's still potential that guys get moved. The offseason isn't over. I know we're about to get the lockout in like 2 days, but the offseason isn't going to end. Once the lockout is over, things are going to start up again. It's just maybe they're trying to be patient. We know Cashman does this every year. It happens every single year. Players start to sign. Yankee fans overreact, saying we're not doing anything. And then at some point in another month or so, we signed like 5 players in a matter of 2 days. It happened last year. We did nothing. Then we got LeMahieu back. Then we made the Ottavino trade. We bring in O'Day and Wilson and Gardner. Weren't great moves, obviously, but that's how it works. That's
they
what
were all
Cashman.
On a budget, though. They were all on a budget, though, Rob. And this is still going to be on a budget as well. You just mentioned Correa and Seager. Do you think we're going to spend that kind of money for Correa or Seager?
I don't want them to spend the money on Seager. I'll say this right now. Why is everyone screaming about getting Seager? They want defense at shortstop. He's not that good defensively. So you want to give him $300 million to move to third base in 2 years. Tell me how that makes sense. It doesn't. Why? Because he's a lefty? So we're going to pay him? Oh, we need the lefty bat that badly that you're going to pay $300 million. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me.
I agree with you, but the narrative is what's concerning. Well, the narrative is concerning because we're being told one thing, and the Yankees are actively doing the complete opposite. We were told that we would be active at the very, very top of the shortstop market. What we're actually doing is we're checking in on the B and the C tier shortstop prospects. That's Trevor Story and Simmons, right? They're the ones that seem to be making the most sense at the moment. I agree with you. I don't think Seager makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't put $300 million in to a guy that's declining defensively significantly. As good as he is offensively, it doesn't make a lot of sense considering we also have 2 sensational shortstop prospects coming through in the next 12 to 24 months. So I completely agree with that. It's just the narrative. And that's why fans are upset. The narrative is changing. We were told in the press conference that there's no budget. We can do what we need to do. That's not the truth because the Yankees are operating on in the trade market. I think that makes the most sense because you don't have to take on massive salary. and you don't have to take on massive years. And the Yankees are checking in on the stopgap market, despite us being told that we're looking at the A-tier market. Do you not agree with that?
Well, that's the problem. The problem is we needed a shortstop 1 year too early. We weren't able 1 year too late. We weren't able to really see if Torres was going to develop, which he did not. And we don't know when Volpe or Peraza is going to be ready. So we're kind of in that limbo right now for this one season of, all right, what do we do? Do we go all in on a free agent shortstop and then use the other guy, those other prospects as trade bait? Or do we bite the bullet and just reshuffle our current infield while we wait for Volpe? So Cashman's he's kind of stuck. He's put himself in a really tight corner.
Well, you're right. He has put himself in that corner. It's not bad luck. The Yankees are architects of their own demise.
Yeah.
They're the ones that trusted Gleyber Torres to play shortstop. They were the ones that ignored his metrics and how terrible he looked during the 60-game season. They ignored that. And then they went into this whole season trusting him. And then they ran him all the way through a dismal year defensively to the point where we almost missed the playoffs. Then we had to move him in order to get us back into the playoffs. They are the architects of this demise. So it's not like, they needed a shortstop a little too early. They've been needing a shortstop for 2 years. They just didn't bother looking at internally properly at what the problem was. The problem was Gleyber Torres. They just refused to admit it.
No, exactly. And that was the premise to my point before. They waited too long to see where they were going to be sitting in the shortstop position, and now they're in the corner. But the other problem is that we're seeing is with the December 1st deadline, before the CBA hits. Then so everybody's in a mad dash to get their rosters ready because they don't want to have to rush to get ready, get a roster for spring training. But you also don't want to rush and make quick decisions without calculating the future moves. So maybe the Yankees are waiting for after the new CBA is in effect, and then they'll make their moves then, which is not going to sit well with a lot of the fans because we want to know who we're cheering for.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to make I'd be surprised if we make a major free agent move today. I think we'll make a trade though, because we've got the non-tender situation with Gary Sanchez. Did you guys hear the rumor that we're discussing a trade with the Marlins to trade Gary Sanchez to the Marlins and then look to maybe trade for Jacob Stallings of Pittsburgh? What's the panel's thoughts here on these potential two moves?
I got the landscapers out there. I'll try to make this quick. They're very loud this morning, but I think it's time to move on from Gary. If they're unsure again, if they want to give him a contract or not, then you have to move on from him. Stallings would be a perfect replacement. He's incredible defensively. He's not a bad bat by any means. He can hit, 240, maybe 250, something like that at the bottom of the order. If that was a move they made today, I think I'd be fine with that if they upgrade the catcher position. I truly believe that Rizzo is going to be our first baseman at this point because I think if we were getting Olsen, it would have happened by now. Plus, I don't think they want to give up the prospect package to get him. I would be okay with trying to get a mega move with Pittsburgh. If you can get Reynolds and Stallings, I'd give up some premier prospects. I've already said that I give up Volpe for Brian Reynolds. And to get both Reynolds and Stallings, I would be willing to give up a lot of prospect capital. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think that Stallings would be a great, great catcher here. We need defense. I mean, look, defense killed us last year. As bad as our offense was at times, defense
just as bad.
Defense was brutal. So if you go into next year, let's say for hypothetical purposes, if we get Rizzo back, and we do sign Simmons, and we move forward with an infield of Rizzo, LeMahieu, Simmons, Urshela, and Stallings as your catcher, and the outfield is already set. And if you get Reynolds, I mean, that's one of the best defenses we've put out there, and the pitchers are going to be better because of it. And those guys can all hit. I mean, is it the sexy signing, like Correa? No, but Reynolds is a hell of a player. Stallings is a hell of a player. Get what you can for Sanchez at this point. It won't be much unless you add on to get a pitcher from Miami, which I don't know why Miami would do that. But yeah, I think it is time, and the bobblehead will have to be retired. But it is what it is with Gary, man. I think a change of scenery is just needed for him. It sucks because I love the guy, but it's not working.
The thing with Gary, when he came up in 16, he blew us all away. We couldn't keep up with every at bat was just phenomenal. His run prevention behind the plate, because nobody was stealing bases on him because his arm was so quick and accurate. And it took that one injury where now he started to press to get back to that form. And then the analytics, every other day, they were tweaking something about how he was standing. His batting stand. They kept changing so many things that he was never able to really find himself again and what got him to the level that he reached. So, like what Rob said, I was a big Sanchez fan, but if you have that window where you can move him to a new home and bring in somebody that can give you the level of catcher that we expected from Gary, you might not have the, Stallings may not have the power that Sanchez does, but you still, if you're able to really benefit defensively, you got to make the move while you can. Because I think if you sit with Gary one more year, your window to really improve the catcher is going to be very, very small.
Well, that's it. I mean, just look at the Yankees' record when Higashioka started last year. They won a lot more games than they lost, and it was a better winning record percentage than Gary Sanchez, I believe. It certainly was for a good portion of the year, and purely because I think that defense is actually the most important at the catcher position. We don't need to replicate 20 home run power for a catcher. It's nice, it's a bonus, but the most important thing is having an excellent receiver that pitchers want to throw to. We don't need to start messing around with personal catchers and all this stuff. And we did it more than once. It wasn't just Cole and Higgy. There was other guys as well. Kluber preferred throwing to Higgy as well. And so it's just not a great sign. The Yankees need to own up to the fact that they mishandled Gary Sanchez. They misdeveloped him. It's another X mark against the Yankees development system. And it's a shame because his projection for the first 2 years of his career was one that he could be one of the greatest Yankee catchers of all time. After obviously the Munson and obviously Posada and Berra. I'm not saying they was in that range, but his home run power was in that potential, in that stratosphere. If the Yankees, his power was not just pure power. He was able to hit to all fields, but the Yankees just didn't nurture it. They didn't nurture his defense, and they coddled his deficiencies, which was laziness and being a terrible defensive catcher. They didn't push him hard enough. They let really good people go to coddle him and to protect him, and now he's fallen off a cliff. They need to move on from him. I've been saying it for a long time. They don't need to replicate his power because they can replicate it through the rest of the lineup. You're looking at Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge. You might even be looking at Olsen. The whole lineup will be hitting. You just need a really good defensive catcher. If he comes up and gives you 10 home runs, bats 250, but gives you Gold Glove defense because just Jacob Stallings is a Gold Glove winner, then I'm okay with that. I think it also shows to me that the Yankees have a plan. And I think that's why Yankee fans are upset right now. We don't have any idea what the Yankees' plan is going into this offseason because the narrative is changing on a week-to-week basis. So if they have a firm plan that, right, we're going to focus on defense. We're going to look at focus on defense at shortstop. We're going to focus on defense at catcher. Then the fan base will be able to get behind that because it is a plan, and it's a smart plan because defense wins championships.
Yeah, that's why I'm starting to come around to the idea of signing Trevor Story. If we can get him for maybe 4 or 5 years, he's going to cost significantly less than Seager and Correa. Story's a hell of a defensive player. I mean, the guy had a great year last year defensively. He had a 9 DRS. His UZR was a 3.6. He's a far better defender than Seager, and he's going to cost you less. Now, will the Yankees pay that kind of money? Well, they were willing to give Verlander $25 million, so I don't know why they wouldn't give, Story similar money per year. If that was their big signing in free agency, was Story, and then you re-sign Rizzo. And like I said, if you trade for Stallings, your defense is significantly better than it was at the end of last year. I mean, like you said earlier, we had to reshuffle the entire infield with 2 weeks, 3 weeks to go because of how bad it was. And it's because the Yankees never realize when they're wrong. Torres was
admit when they were wrong. They saw it. They recognized it. They didn't address it.
They don't want to admit when they're wrong. They hate to admit when they're wrong because they want to be, as has been noted many, many times on this podcast, they need to be the smartest people in the room. Yeah. Well, the eye test told us differently. The change was needed. I wanted Torres to be the shortstop, but it just wasn't there. Now, can he be a good second baseman? Sure. Why not? But right now you have to decide, if you're signing a shortstop, who's playing second? Is it LeMahieu or is it Torres? Because then you got to decide who's getting traded. Is it Urshela or is it Torres? The decisions have to be made, and that's why I think they're really quiet right now, because they don't know what they want to do. I'm fearing that we could see Urshela at shortstop next year if they just re-sign Rizzo and then they just go with the same infield that they had at the end of last year. That could potentially happen. It's almost a disaster if you go with that, because that tells me that they're looking for the prospects to come up sooner than they need to be. Peraza's not ready yet. He's the closest, but he's not ready yet. They should not rush him.
No, well, that's the problem. That's why the CBA is so handcuffing Cashman and Howe right now, because Cashman, they don't have the time to work on all the different parallels. If I make this move, this is where the timeline can go. If I make this move, that's where this timeline can go. They don't have that this year. You have a rush to December 1st, and then once everything is done, depending on how long it takes, then you have a roster rush for spring training, whenever that starts. So they really, I'm not expecting, that's why I'm not expecting Cashman to make the big sexy splash, but I want him to make a smart move that addresses the issues that are needed. If it's the infield defense, if that's his goal, then do it. If it's making sure that you're the back end of your bullpen, you have enough arms that you could rotate so nobody gets burned out by the end of the year, then do that. First base, center field. There's so many. The Yankees need 7 different moves to have everything come together, and the CBA is really shortening the window on it. And Cashman's he's got to be if he thinks he's as smart as he is, he's got to show it this year more than any.
Well, this next 24 hours is going to answer a lot of questions. And also, this is very unheard of for baseball. This is sort of like Christmas Eve shopping. This is like, it's all going to happen within the next 24 hours. It's going to be a crazy mad dash 24 hours where teams are going to desperately try and sign as many people as they possibly can, tie up as many loose ends as they possibly can. There's contract language, physicals that need to be done within 24 hours prior to this lockout. All kinds of crazy things are going to happen within these next 24 hours. It's very much like the NFL free agency period opening, and same with the NBA free agency opening, because it all happens in a mad dash 24 hours. And now baseball's jumped in, and it's kind of exciting if you're a baseball fan, because you're going to be pinned to Twitter for the next 24 hours. And how often does that happen with baseball? Almost never. So on this rare occasion, all baseball fans all over the world are going to be tuned into Twitter to see what their moves are going to be made for their team. So we'll wait and see. It's going to be very interesting from the Yankees' perspective. I just want a plan. I agree with you. I just want to see a plan. If there's the fluid plan, I don't want, because the Yankees haven't followed a plan in a while. The only plan that they followed is to get under the luxury tax. It wasn't to win. It wasn't to build around anybody. It wasn't to build a team. It was to get under the luxury tax. That's the only plan that we've known of for the last year. So what is this new plan prior to the CBA? What is the new plan? That's what I want to know. I want to know a plan for catcher, and I also want to know a plan for shortstop. And then we've also got to cover first base, center field, and starting pitching. And there's a whole lot that needs to be done. And I'm not convinced Hal Steinbrenner wants to cough up that much money in order to cover these positions. That's why I think a lot of trades are going to be made rather than free agent signing.
Yeah. Yeah. The other day I put a Twitter poll up on the Pinstripe Chronicles account. And I addressed the question. I'm like, is Cashman better off with free agency, saving prospects, trading prospects, or calling up prospects? And 50% of the votes went towards trades. They're ready to move on from these prospects if it means securing other positions. That's how I read how they wanted to vote. And do you think that that's something that's going to be that's the more realistic way to go?
I do.
I think so. I think you have to move on from some of these guys, and I've said it countless times, especially at the shortstop position. You have too many of them. You have to trade somebody. They have to decide who do they want to be if they're going stopgap at shortstop. So let's say it's Simmons.
Absolutely.
Who is it that's coming up to replace him? Is it Peraza or is it Volpe? Because right now you can trade Anthony Volpe, whose ceiling is through the roof. His potential is through the roof, and his value is through the roof. If he gets you a Brian Reynolds type of player, you have to pull the trigger on it because there's no guarantee he's going to work out. He's still in low A ball right now, high A, whatever it is. He's not even reached double A. There's no guarantee he's going to be ready in 2 years. Something could happen that hinders his progression. I hope it doesn't. I think he's going to be a good player. But Brian Reynolds is an established player right now. He's a guy that helps you win right now. So it's going to take more than just Volpe, of course. But if you have to give up these potential players, these potentially good players, to get guys like Stallings and Reynolds, and I don't know if Reynolds is even available in trade. I'm just kind of speaking hypothetically here, but you kind of have to do that. The team's window is closing. The Blue Jays are significantly better today than they were yesterday or 2 days ago. They just added Kevin Gausman, and their pitching staff is loaded. Their offense is loaded. The Red Sox are going to be competitive. The Rays are always going to be good. The Yankees are going to have a tough time in their own division. Forget about the wild card right now. They got to worry about not even finishing fourth in the AL East. So you have to improve this roster. And if that's doing drastic trades and trading some top prospects, I said before, I think there should be 2 untouchables. Now I think it's just Dominguez. I think he's the only guy you don't move on from because your outfield depth is so thin. But infield depth is loaded. So, yeah, if you can move Volpe to get a guy like Brian Reynolds and Jacob Stallings, do it. Because your major league team is better this year, next year, the year after. It just makes a lot of sense. And they can make smaller signings where they're not spending a ton of money and still make this team better. So the options
are still addressing the issues.
Right. The options are out there. They just have to do something because the only move we've made so far is signing Joely Rodriguez. Our bullpen's pretty much set. We have to figure out what this defensive alignment is going to be. They haven't made a move yet. I think something's coming soon, though, because it almost has to.
Too quiet.
Yeah, it's too quiet. And when Cashman is too quiet, something happens, whether it's a small or a big move. I think something is coming today. I'm crossing my fingers at least, but they have to do something. And I think that trading prospects is the way to go.
Yeah.
Here's what I don't understand, right? We put in an offer of $25 million for Verlander. Didn't land him. And have not gone after any other starting pitcher in the market. They've not checked in on Max Scherzer. They've not checked in on Robbie Ray. They're not amongst the teams that are active in Robbie Ray negotiations.
Well, that's being reviewed.
What I don't understand is, was Verlander the only option that we had as starting pitcher? Was he the only priority in free agency? Did the Yankees view him as the best arm in the market? Because Robbie Ray is a better arm than Verlander, considering he's younger and just won a Cy Young, and he's not coming off Tommy John. But the Yankees aren't active on that. So I want to know, what sense does that make? So you have the money for $25 million from Verlander, but you've not seemingly checked in on anybody else. I mean, that money could have been used on a bunch of areas which I think were a priority. I've been saying all podcast, all year, I wanted Marte. Marte answered a lot of our questions. We needed speed, we needed defense, and we needed somebody that could bat 300 in the top of the order. He was exactly the athletic speed guy that we need. And the Yankees weren't interested in Marte and they let him go to the Mets. So, like, I just want to know exactly what the Yankee strategy is, and if you're going to put in that kind of offer for a starting pitcher, and then you're not going to start engaging in other starting pitchers in the market, are you saying that Verlander was the only free agent that they liked, and they're just not only going to look at the trade market now?
I think it's the years. I don't think they wanted to go too many years, because if they get Ray, it's going to be 5+. If they get Rodon, it's going to be 5+. I just don't think they want to give out those big contracts to pitchers, because right now, you look at Cole, he's in another like 3 years, he's going to start to decline, and they're going to be paying a lot of money. I think they're really trying to avoid giving starting pitching a lot of years. I mean, look at Scherzer. He's about to get $40 million a year from the Mets for about 2 years. I think you're going to start to see that more, like less years, but higher dollar value.
Yeah.
You might start seeing that, because look what Washington's dealing with. Strasburg's barely pitched, and they've got him for a while. So maybe that's what it is.
You're right. I believe that the Mets offer is 3 years, $134 million. The last time I checked,
It might even be more.
Averages out at $43 million average salary per year. Obviously, I think we should touch on the Mets, but it's just, I completely agree with you, though. It is the years, but I don't think it's just starting pitching. I think that's in general. I don't think Hal Steinbrenner wants to take on any years. I think that's the message to Brian Cashman. He doesn't want significant contracts that's going to go 6-7 years. That's why I know that we were interested in Semien, but once the years started shooting up because the Rangers competing against the Blue Jays for him, then the Yankees ducked out. So I think if you're going to look for a free agency for the Yankees, it's going to be on a short-term basis.
Yeah, I want to close it out with one question, and that is, of the moves that were made, whether it was trade, free agency, or extension, was there a move that was made this weekend that blew you away? You did not see it coming.
I kind of saw Texas making those moves coming, because they were my pick to have a big offseason. The Mets getting Scherzer, even though it hasn't been officially announced yet, that's kind of blowing me away, because there was all the reports that he does not want to pitch in New York. So the fact that the Mets are willing to give him close to $45 million a year, not total contract, a year, to come pitch in New York, of course he's going to take that money. That's unbelievable money for a guy his age. And so, I mean, I'll give Steve Cohen credit. He's a dope, but he's putting his money where his mouth is. The guy said, I'm going to spend to make this team better. And he's
doing it.
He's making the attempt. And maybe Steven Matz's agent pissing him off was the final straw for him, because now he's just saying, I'm going to sign everybody. Screw it. He signed really good players. Canna's a good player. Escobar is a good player. Marte's a fantastic player, and he's about to get one of the best pitchers in baseball. And I'm fearing when we have to go play the Mets this year, because it's a couple of 2-game series, and I got a bad feeling it's going to be DeGrom and Scherzer in back-to-back games. So I give them credit. I think it's good for the sport when the New York teams are good. I still hate them.
Well, who knows? Maybe we'll be able to counter with Cole and Ray. In
our case, it's going to be like Cole and Matthew Boyd, because he's about to he's going to get non-tendered, and we're going to sign him expecting him to pitch in like June or July. I think that's what's going to happen. We're going to go with a move like that, and it will not surprise me at all, because they wanted Boyd a few years ago, but they were
Yeah,
asking
go high
for
on him. Yeah.
yeah.
I agree, man. I would say that the Simeon signing for the Rangers for 7 years was a little bit of a surprise to me. That was a surprise, but the biggest shock is actually the Mets. Not necessarily any one move that the Mets have made. It's how the Mets have basically put money where their mouth is, and they're acting like the Yankees did, and it's refreshing to be honest. I mean, the fact that they have to offer Scherzer over $40 million a year just for him to come to their organization does speak to the fact that the Mets have a very low standing right now in baseball. You know, we've talked about the fact they don't have a manager. We've talked about all their previous GMs that had DUIs and all kinds of nonsense, and then we've talked about the fact that they tried to use the excuse that it's New York was the reason why GMs didn't want to come to the Mets. No, it was because the Mets are a lost franchise, right? So with all those problems, Steve Cohen then obviously did the dopey tweet, which I think has embarrassed himself in baseball circles. But what he has done is he's gone, as Rob says, heck with it, right? I want Scherzer. What's it going to take? And he's bidding crazy numbers in order to beat the Dodgers to do it. And they're the most active, and they're currently negotiating. It's just the last tweet we've just seen from 18 minutes ago that they're back re-engaged with Boris to try and get Scherzer done. Now, I think deep down Scherzer wants to go back to the Dodgers, and I think he would rather go to a winning organization. But when you're talking about $40 million per year, he'll probably end up just making it happen and go to the Mets. But credit to the Mets. I think Marte was a great sign. Kanye's a fine player. Escobar's a fine player. They are making smart moves. These are not stupid moves. These are actually great players, very good players, and they're all in the process of building a team. And
Well, that's
I
why
think
Cohen
Yankee
has.
fans, yeah.
Cohen and Epler, they have the advantage right now in the Scherzer negotiations because they could go to him and Boris and be like, look at these acquisitions we just made, and we're not done yet.
Yeah.
You know, and the being telling Scherzer, you can still make your money, but you don't have to be the pressure's not all on you because you'll be pitching with DeGrom. So the Mets, for the 3 Met fans that I actually enjoy interacting with, I was really happy to see that they were, they actually have some relevance at this point. They don't know who their manager is yet, which I think is hilarious. Players are signing, they don't even know who they're playing for. So
we can say a lot about Steve Cohen. We can laugh about him all we want, but no one can complain about the fact that he really cares about the Mets. He really cares. He is a Met fan.
Yeah.
And he is acting like a Met fan. And he's trying to make things happen for the Mets franchise. And then you look at our owner. He doesn't care about the Yankees. I'm really sorry, guys. He might throw you a crumb or two in order to keep you re-engaging and getting season tickets, chicken buckets, and things like that. He'll throw you a crumb and sign somebody good. But as I've talked about, we are in the bottom 2. I think we're rock bottom in terms of spend per revenue. Our revenue is through the roof for the New York Yankees. We're the most important franchise in the world of sports. We transcend baseball, and we have an owner who is deliberately holding off on spending for all kinds of reasons. As I obviously mentioned at the start of the podcast, he voted against increasing the luxury tax because he doesn't want to spend. He does not want to spend. Now, he might be forced to in order to have us give him season tickets and stuff like that, but it's not for the fact that a couple of times he'll say, oh, it's about winning. He doesn't care about winning. He's already proven he doesn't care about winning. But Steve Cohen does, and credit to him. Now, he's a dope, and I think the way he owns the Mets is ridiculous and embarrassing, but his heart is in the right place. And I don't think Hal's heart is in the right place.
Yeah, I would say for me, the surprise move, even though it's not like a sticker shock thing was the Jays getting Guzman. That was that one move where it was kind of like, oh shit, you know. We always said, their pitching is what was going to be the problem, but the Jays getting Kevin Guzman is, I think that just is now the AL East is going to be that much more tougher to win.
Yeah, the AL East is going to be difficult, man. And if we go into this season with a similar roster, we're in trouble. So yeah, I think if there was ever a time for old daddy issue Hal Steinbrenner to wake up, this is it. We've all said it. The issues with this team start with him. Cashman can only do what he's told to do, even though I believe this is mainly Cashman's team, but Hal's still putting the budget out there. And why reset the luxury tax last year if you're not going to spend big? Now, I'm not asking to give out $45 million to Max Scherzer, but make moves, get something happening here, because right now our roster is not ready to win a championship. It's clear as day because we haven't won a championship. So you got to make something happen, Hal. And right now this is the day to do it before you get locked out, because this league is a joke. So we'll see what happens.
Do you guys agree with what I'm saying about Hal Steinbrenner, or am I being overly harsh?
No, I think you're spot on.
We would have, if he cared as much as he says he does, then we would have had a championship by now. Because there have been moves that should have been made that would have helped us win a championship. Something as simple as signing a Michael Brantley, would have helped us significantly. And he didn't do it because of the luxury tax. And, I'm not saying I wish George was still around, but George would have made those moves. He would have said the hell with the luxury tax, and he would have. Now, to Hal's credit, he has spent. It's not like he's not spending money. He did get Cole. Everyone was asking for Cole. He did go and get the NL MVP and Giancarlo Stanton. He's adding money. He brought back LeMahieu. Everyone wanted LeMahieu back. However, then he turned around and went budget when he traded Ottavino to sign 3 other players to fill up that money. So it's the lying that he does. Like, oh, we would have went over the luxury tax.
Yeah, that's a lie.
Well, then you traded players. Prove it. There you go. Prove it. Put your money where your mouth is. Cohen's doing it. As much of an idiot as he is on Twitter, he's doing it. Hal, you have the money to do it. Do it. That's all we're asking. Just make some moves here. Make this team better, because at least if we see that effort, even if we don't win it this year, which is going to piss us off, of course, but if at least you're putting in the effort to say, we want to make this team better. So if you go get Stallings and you go get Story, moves like that, saying, hey, you're at least putting in the effort. Now it's up to the roster and the coaching. We don't have the manager for it, but it's up to these guys to get it done. He can only do so much and say, I gave you the money. Cashman went and spent it. Now you got to go do it. That's what I'm asking from Hal Steinbrenner.
Yep.
I agree with that. I mean, to be honest, to be fairness to Hal, he is right in the fact that Yankees can win a championship without having a $250 million payroll, $300 million payroll. I'm not saying it needs to be that high. So he is right to have some kind of a budget. I'm not saying just spot by everybody, but the Yankees have the means to do what they need to do to get better. And there's a quarter of our roster which is completely broken and needs fixed. And it's up to Hal Steinbrenner now to admit the fact that he has the means to afford it. The reason why a lot of teams like the Rays and all these guys operate on a budget is because they have no money, they have no means in order to do these kind of things, right? So they have to be really tight. They have to be really cutthroat in their trades and the way that they produce prospects, because they can't afford not to. The Yankees can afford to make mistakes, to screw up franchise talent like Clint Frazier and Gary Sanchez and Gleyber Torres, and let all their talent just deteriorate, because they can just go and sign somebody else. They can go and trade for somebody else, and continue to roll. Other teams can't operate like that. So the Yankees have the means to get better. It's whether Hal Steinbrenner has the guts to go and do that.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think it's going to be a very wild 24 hours. And every time my phone pings, I'm like, all right, shit, not our team, but I think we're going to start seeing some really good moves over the next 24 hours. I want to see smart moves, not just good moves.
You guys rooting for
smart.
Trevor Story? Is it Trevor Story you want, Tats?
I've been saying it for since before the offseason started. I think Trevor Story would be a really solid stopgap while we wait to see what our prospects are. I think you can get him on a low-level 3-year deal and really get a chance to see where you're at. And if the contract is right, if they're ready early that last year, Story will have a movable contract. You could trade, replenish some of the minor leagues while bringing up a Volpe. So I'm still I'm all in on getting Trevor Story. And I'm going to stand by that because I think that really does make sense. It's not the sexy move, but it's the smart move. And I actually think the Stallings thing announcement, the trade for Stallings with Sanchez, I think that has a lot more life than we're giving it credit for. I think that's something that's very realistic. So that's something else I could see happening before the shutdown. But we'll see you on the next episode when what announcements we're able to make, and we'll take it from we'll go from there, and then we'll react to it like we always do. And so just want to thank everybody for watching. Just remember, like, share, comment, and subscribe. Check out our social medias in the description. Wear your pinstripes with pride and play hard.